Jonathan Adler had always been an ordinary man living an ordinary life, a middle school teacher in the small town of Placid Springs, New England. He'd always had an affinity for solitude and the tranquil rhythm of nature, which is why he'd chosen a quaint home nestled within the town's outskirts. That tranquility was shattered one evening by a surprise visit from his estranged uncle, a man he barely remembered from his childhood. Uncle Caleb was a husky man with a wild, untamed beard and stormy eyes that held a distant echo of some unspeakable horror. The old man brought an air of mystery with him, and a strange inheritance. An antique silver amulet shaped like a wolf's head, an Adler family heirloom that Jonathan never knew existed. Caleb's eyes, brimming with urgency, bored into Jonathan's. "It's yours now, Johnny," he'd said. "The moment the moon hits the apex of the sky, wear it, promise me." Confused, Jonathan had given his word, more to appease his uncle's odd request than out of understanding. Later that night, as the moon floated high in the inky sky, Jonathan was jolted awake by the piercing howl of a wolf. He lived nowhere near a forest, and the sound was strangely close. Instinctively, he reached for the amulet, its metallic chill spreading up his arm. The moment it touched his skin, a searing pain radiated from his heart. His veins felt as if coursing with liquid fire. Jonathan crumpled onto the wooden floor, his vision blurring as a new, terrifying strength surged within him. He was changing. His fingers lengthened into claws, and his body convulsed as muscles expanded beneath the skin. His eyes stung as they adjusted to the dark room, becoming more potent, more animalistic. Pain turned into exhilaration, fear into acceptance. As he looked into the mirror, no longer did he see the gentle, soft-spoken teacher. He saw a predator. He saw a beast. His transformation was swift, merciless, and absolute. Jonathan Adler, the ordinary man, had been replaced by something primal, something extraordinary, a creature of legend. With a guttural growl, he leapt through the open window, the night air welcoming him like an old friend. Jonathan sprinted into the darkness, an exhilarating blend of fear and liberation guiding him. The world was no longer a familiar place, but a hunting ground to his newfound senses. The sound of the howling wolf echoed again, this time in his ears and his soul, stirring a response from the beast within. It was no ordinary howl. It was a call, a challenge, and he was going to answer it. The inheritance of the moon had awoken something within Jonathan Adler, an ordinary man no more. He was a creature of the night now, a creature of legend, a werewolf. The quiet town of Placid Springs was in for an extraordinary upheaval, and the threads of Jonathan's ordinary life were about to entangle in a web of lunar curses, silver amulets, and savage beasts. Little did he know, his life was about to become anything but ordinary. The first rays of dawn kissed the sky, dispelling the dark cover of night. The beast that was Jonathan Adler cowered back towards the town, his lupine form giving way to the man he once was. The transition was agonizing, his body reshaping and shrinking, the fire in his veins replaced by an aching coldness. Naked and trembling, Jonathan found his way back home, a newfound dread gnawing at his heart. News traveled fast in Placid Springs. By the time Jonathan woke late that afternoon, the town was buzzing with whispers of terror. The butcher's son, a strapping lad of just 17, had been found dead near the forest's edge. His body was mangled, torn apart as though by a wild animal. The boy's eyes, wide open in perpetual terror, bore the unmistakable mark of an encounter with a monster. Jonathan's blood ran cold. Images of last night flashed through his mind, the transformation, the thrill of the hunt, the taste of raw meat. Horror washed over him. Was he capable of such savagery? Had he crossed the line from man to monster? In the privacy of his home, he examined the amulet again. The wolf's head, which had seemed like an exquisite piece of craftsmanship the day before, now looked ominous and deadly. He wondered if it was the catalyst for his transformation, or if it merely awakened something dormant within him. The sun sunk lower in the sky, and Jonathan could feel a restlessness growing within him. As moonlight once again spilled into his room, the anticipation of the transformation was almost unbearable. He decided to confront the beast within him. With trembling hands, he put on the amulet and waited. This time, he wouldn't run into the wilderness. This time, he'd lock himself away. As his body convulsed and reshaped, a pain more excruciating than the physical transformation engulfed him, the pain of guilt. He could see the butcher's son's terrified face in his mind's eye, the first casualty of the monster he'd become. The thought was horrifying, the guilt insurmountable. He howled, not a call to the moon, but a plea for forgiveness, a cry of despair that echoed through the small town. Meanwhile, in Placid Springs, the townsfolk mourned their loss, unaware that the beast they feared was not in the wilderness, but among them. As Jonathan grappled with his monstrous identity, the town held its breath, dreading the fall of night and the unseen terror that lurked in its shadows. Little did they know, their ordinary lives were about to change. The silver shadow had claimed its first victim, and the dread of what was to come was a palatable cloud over Placid Springs. Fear lurked around every corner, a chilling reminder of the predator in their midst. In the light of day, Jonathan felt the weight of his monstrous deeds. He retreated to his house, away from the curious, terrified eyes of his neighbors. He hadn't answered the call of the beast last night, had forced himself to stay indoors. The guilt was still overwhelming, but at least he knew he hadn't claimed another life. Haunted by his new reality, Jonathan decided to confront his past. He remembered Uncle Caleb's tales of his travels and explorations, the ancient artifacts he'd discovered, the cultures he'd learned about. The man was an enigma, and his sudden visit, even more so. There had to be a reason why he'd left the amulet with Jonathan. Searching through his uncle's old letters and journals, Jonathan discovered a hidden history of the Adler family. They were not simply scholars and explorers, as he'd been led to believe. They were descendants of an ancient line of werewolves, their bloodline cursed centuries ago by a pagan witch. The amulet was not a mere heirloom, it was a conduit, a symbol of their transformation. With each revelation, Jonathan's dread deepened. He was not just a man turned into a monster, he was a monster by birth. The very blood running in his veins was cursed. Meanwhile, the town was on edge. The authorities had initiated a curfew, and hunting parties were organized to find the beast terrorizing Placid Springs. Little did they know, the monster they sought was not in the wilderness, but within their midst. As night approached, Jonathan decided to leave. He couldn't risk another transformation in town, couldn't bear the thought of hurting someone else. He packed a bag and, under the cover of darkness, made his escape into the woods. Just as the transformation began to take hold, a group of hunters spotted him. They raised their guns, their faces a mask of fear and determination. The last thing Jonathan saw before his vision sharpened and changed was the flash of a bullet leaving a barrel. In his wolf form, Jonathan managed to dodge the bullet and disappear into the woods, leaving behind a trail of shock and realization. The hunters stood frozen, their minds grappling with the horror of what they'd witnessed. The secret was out. The beast of Placid Springs was none other than Jonathan Adler, their neighbor, their friend, their teacher. The town spiraled into chaos, the terror more real than ever. Jonathan, now a fugitive and a monster, plunged deeper into the wilderness, leaving behind his life in Placid Springs. The secrets of his past had cost him his present, and his future looked grim. As he disappeared into the darkness, Jonathan could only wonder what lay ahead. His life was no longer ordinary, but a terrifying saga of moonlit transformations and hunted nights. Jonathan's flight into the wilderness marked the beginning of a life on the run. As a man, he was a hunted fugitive, feared and despised by those he once knew. As a beast, he was a primal force, guided by instincts and the moon's eerie glow. Days blurred into nights as he moved further into the wild, constantly looking over his shoulder for the townsmen that pursued him. He dared not approach human settlements, the guilt of what he could become still fresh in his mind. His only solace came during the day, when he was just a man, haunted but human. His nights were a different story. As the beast took hold, Jonathan felt an intense hunger that was not entirely his own. He hunted, not for pleasure, but survival. Each kill was a grim reminder of the butcher's son, the life he'd taken in his first monstrous frenzy. Word of the Placid Springs beast spread across neighboring towns and cities, turning Jonathan into a legend. The media painted him as a monster, a cold-blooded killer. His former life as a teacher was forgotten, replaced by the image of a beast on a bloodthirsty rampage. One cold night, while fleeing from a pack of hounds set on his trail, Jonathan stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin deep within the woods. With a mix of human resourcefulness and wolf-like strength, he managed to secure the cabin and find some respite. But peace was not on his side. He was jolted awake by the distant sound of hounds baying, drawing nearer. The townsfolk had traced him. Panicked, he grabbed the amulet, his fingers tracing the intricate design of the wolf's head. He'd hoped to have more time, but the moon was rising and the transformation was imminent. The cabin's door burst open just as the convulsions started. Through the pane, Jonathan saw the horrified faces of his pursuers, their rifles aimed at him. But instead of fear, he felt a wild surge of adrenaline, a primal urge to fight. As the transformation completed, he leapt towards the intruders. Gunshots echoed around the small cabin, but none hit their mark. The beast was too swift, too agile. In seconds, Jonathan was out the back door and into the dark, dense forest, leaving behind a trail of chaos and terror. His escape into the wilderness marked the beginning of a deadly cat-and-mouse game. Jonathan Adler, the mild-mannered teacher, was now the Placid Springs beast, a creature of nightmares, forever on the run. His life had turned into a terrifying chase, a desperate quest for survival against a world that feared and hunted him. The bloodied states of his existence, the man and the beast, were more at odds than ever. The question was which one would survive. Days turned into weeks, then into months. The wilderness became Jonathan's refuge, his sanctuary. Despite the hardships, he learned to adapt to his dual existence, to use his beastly powers for survival, not savagery. As the months wore on, Jonathan learned to control the beast within him, his will somehow tempering the primal instincts of the creature. One evening, under the luminous full moon, Jonathan came across another creature of the night, a werewolf like him. Her name was Mina, a lone wanderer caught in the same horrific circumstances. Recognizing their shared fate, they formed an alliance, seeking strength and solace in each other's company. The duo roamed the wilderness, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They shared stories, fears, and hopes, finding a strange comfort in their shared curse. In Mina, Jonathan found a companion, an ally, and a piece of his humanity he thought he'd lost forever. Meanwhile, back in Placid Springs, the townsfolk were growing desperate. The creature that once haunted them had now become a legend, his supposed sightings creating panic across various states. A notorious hunter, Ethan Cromwell, was called upon to end this reign of terror. Ethan was a formidable man, a legend in his own right, known for hunting down creatures of the night. Armed with his knowledge of the supernatural and his trusty silver bullets, Ethan arrived at Placid Springs, his determined eyes set on the monster he was to hunt down. As Ethan commenced his relentless pursuit, Jonathan and Mina found themselves on the run again, but this time they weren't alone. Together, they were stronger, more defiant. The presence of another hunter, however, introduced a new level of danger. One fateful night, under a sky lit with the menacing glow of the full moon, Jonathan and Mina found themselves cornered. Ethan Cromwell, his eyes burning with determination, stood before them, his gun loaded with silver bullets. Jonathan stepped forward, shielding Mina, his eyes reflecting the fierce moonlight. A terrifying growl escaped him, a clear warning to the hunter. The peaceful teacher was gone. In his place stood a formidable beast ready to protect his own. Ethan raised his gun, his gaze unwavering. The standoff was tense, each second ticking away with the promise of a deadly confrontation. Jonathan was ready. The blood of his ancestors ran strong in his veins, the spirit of the wolf alive within him. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about defiance, about showing their hunter that they were more than monsters. They were creatures of the night, yes, but they were also victims of a curse, forced to live in the shadows. Tonight, under the wolf moon, they would stand their ground, fight back, reclaim their existence. The reign of the Placid Springs beast was far from over. It was just the beginning. Under the ominous glow of the full moon, Jonathan and Mina stood defiantly against Ethan Cromwell. The air was thick with tension, each passing second building up to the inevitable clash. The confrontation was violent and swift. Ethan's bullets flew through the night, their deadly silver glint matching the brilliance of the moon. But the wolves were faster, their primal instincts heightened by the danger. Jonathan leapt at Ethan, knocking the gun away while Mina tackled him from the other side. The hunter, taken aback by the unexpected ferocity, fell to the ground, losing his weapon. Before he could recover, Jonathan pinned him down, his lupine eyes glaring into the terrified gaze of the hunter. But he did not harm Ethan. Instead, he let out a guttural growl, a clear warning, before retreating into the wilderness with Mina. News of their confrontation with Ethan spread quickly, adding another layer to the legend of the Placid Springs beast. However, Jonathan and Mina had made their point. They were not mindless killers, but victims of a cruel fate, forced into their monstrous existence. Ethan Cromwell, once the proud hunter, returned to Placid Springs, defeated and humbled. His tales of the encounter changed the narrative around Jonathan and Mina, their story becoming a cautionary tale about fear and misunderstanding. In the years that followed, Jonathan and Mina lived in the seclusion of the wilderness, their lives a blend of primal existence and stolen moments of humanity. Their alliance grew into something deeper, a shared understanding of their fate and a silent promise to endure it together. Meanwhile, the legacy of the Placid Springs beast lived on, the tale growing with each retelling. It became a legend of two werewolves who defied their cursed existence, who chose to control their beastly instincts rather than let it control them. Their tale was one of terror, yes, but also of resilience, a testament to their struggle against the darkness within. It was a grim reminder of the beast that lurked in the shadows, but also of the humanity that refused to be defeated. Jonathan Adler, once a simple schoolteacher, had left behind a legacy that was as extraordinary as it was terrifying. His life had become an echo of the beast, a chilling tale of transformation, survival, and defiance under the eerie glow of the moon. And in the heart of the wilderness, under each full moon, that echo would continue to resonate, a haunting melody of their existence.